Welcome to the Happy Rebel podcast, where we explore the realms of finding your calling, living your values, and doing the work of self-healing. Through candid conversations with fellow seekers, we'll uncover ideas and concepts that challenge, expand, and empower us to embrace our authentic selves and live with intention. Hi there, I'm Kelly Street, owner of Happy Rebel and your guide on this journey. I'm known for my insatiable curiosity and tendency for pushing boundaries. I've always been a challenger, eager to question the status quo and explore the uncharted territories of personal growth. So join me as we navigate the twists and turns of life's journey, seeking out the wisdom and insights that illuminate our path towards fulfillment and rebellion against the ordinary. Before we get started, I want to remind you to connect with me on Instagram at Happy Rebel, where you can ask questions and share your thoughts. Remember, you are never alone on your path to becoming a happy rebel. This is the Happy Rebel Podcast. As we enter the space of the Happy Rebel podcast, I invite you to gently focus your eyes, or if possible, allow your eyes to be fully closed. Take a deep, cleansing breath and exhale to ground into your body. Inhale deeply, visualizing a golden light in your heart center. With each exhale, imagine that light growing stronger and brighter. Continue breathing as you prepare to honor the complexities of life, embracing the balance between the light and the dark of your own experiences and in the conversation to come. With gratitude for this moment of grounding and connection, slowly open your eyes as we begin this podcast adventure together. Hello, Maria. I am so delighted for you to be on here. I know it's your first podcast, and I am so honored that you would choose to share it with me and with everybody listening. So why don't you say hello to everybody and introduce yourself first and foremost?
So happy to be here. This is so cool. I've been, well, I guess, wishing this moment my whole life, and to do it with you is such an honor and fun and a privilege. Let's see. I live in New York. I was born in Greece, and my parents, my sister and I came here when I was really little. And let's see, I co-founded a company with my husband decades ago, and I'm in it with my children also. So it's really cool, and here I am.
Yeah. Okay. And I just want to point out to people, so your company, I believe, is one of the main companies that creates locks for hotel rooms, or the like lock unlock system or key card system.
So we're not the manufacturer, but we are one of the few companies that actually is in this very niche industry. So it's hotel guest room locks and systems. And yeah, we've been doing it for 30 years.
Yeah. Okay, this is coming to me. I just have to ask right away.
Yeah.
How in the world did you come up with that as your company? Like, how did that come to be? I would
It
never have
actually,
thought of that.
I know. Well, my husband was actually in the business. We've been together since we were very young, and the entrepreneur bug was always there for me. And
Yeah.
somewhere in my late 20s, our late 20s, he had this opportunity. Um, and he said, "Look, this opportunity came up. What do you think? Should we do it?" And I remember saying, F yes. Sorry to be. And that's how it started. I think it was just around the entrepreneur bug of wanting to do something my way and to be creative and create something from on some level from scratch. So it's evolved a lot since then. That was literally 29 years ago, last month. So here we are. Yeah, my initial thing was definitely not that. It was to be an archaeologist or to work for the United Nations, but the entrepreneurship was a big thing. And here we are.
And here you are.
Here we are.
And all the way from being born and having your very early childhood in Greece.
Yeah, yeah. So much has changed, and I think that feeling of having a foot in both worlds has never really changed. the the feeling of belonging to a different, culture, a different way of doing things. I speak both languages and very much identify with the music and a lot of things that are Greek. So it's kind of beautiful. And then to be in New York, which is so diverse, it
Mhm.
feels beautiful actually to be here and to understand the idea of like immigrant and culture. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, it would be much harder to have moved to like Nebraska or something like that from.
Probably, yeah, very much feeling accepted here. And it's funny, reminded me of something. My older sister always felt, and I didn't know this until recently, that she always felt this feeling of immigrant girl.
Mm,
And not to put words into her mouth, but it felt almost like a negative thing. And
yeah.
I never had that feeling. I don't, how interesting that two people can grow up in the same household and have such different ideas around it. I never felt that as a stigma or something negative. I guess as an older child, she probably experienced things that I was too young to experience. But I've always felt kind of a richness around understanding the language and the culture and the nuance of the music that is so just so beautiful. So yeah, I feel fortunate, and my children have taken that as well. So it's beautiful.
That is. That
Yeah.
is. Yeah. Greece is, I think, probably at this point for international travel, it is probably my number one, the place that I would love to go, that just feel very called. There's something about the ancient ruins and just the culture, the architecture there, that I feel so called to. And I find to be intoxicatingly beautiful when I look at photos of pretty much anywhere in Greece. I'm just like, yep, I want to go there.
Well, that would be a gift to experience it with you one day. That would be pretty fun. Yeah,
Oh, that would be
it's quite
amazing.
magical. It's quite magical, and it's actually more beautiful in person than any photo obviously can do justice.
Oh, I bet. I bet. So, what was it like to do you have any memories from that age? You know, you said you came here to the United States when you were 4. Do you have any kind of memories or things that come to you about that period of time in your life?
Very, very few. It's interesting. Very few. Some of them have come up more in like I've done a lot of women's retreats and stuff where I've been in these places of deep quiet, and some of these tiny pinpoints of memories have expanded inside of these quiet spaces where I was able to travel back, not even knowing that there was a back to travel to that was so deep and wide. And in those moments, some things came up of like being 4 and staring up at a it was so few lights. It was this tiny city in Greece at the time in the 60s, and I just remember being in awe of the stars. And this is like one of those moments where it's kind of interesting to share it here, but pointing up and saying to my maternal grandmother who was raising me at the time, I came from there. And inside of these quiet spaces, that memory came back, and it came back even deeper about what that meant. And some of these other feelings of belonging, of not knowing who I am, what I am, started to come back to me. But very few memories because I was so young. And yet a lot happened, I think. A lot
Yeah.
happened. Yeah.
Yeah, memory is such an interesting thing that I'm kind of endlessly fascinated with, because I think that especially the misunderstanding that children don't remember things that happened before a certain age, when there's a lot of research that shows that we do remember. It just maybe is in the form of, it's something that's more sensed or something that we feel in our bodies, because we maybe didn't have the words for it yet or didn't have language to describe something that happened.
Oh, I love that. And actually, I love words and the idea of remember, the memory, but bringing it back together. So there's almost like, for me, a feeling of the past and the future all being one. Like, if I've always imagined that it's like a sliding ruler, and that ruler is always there. The numbers on it are always there, and you're just kind of pulling that slider across. And
Yeah.
there are times where in these quiet, deeply quiet spaces, where it so feels I'm there, and there isn't a sense of time and space. So the feeling of remember, just to remember all the parts of me and bring it back together. I don't know that we'll get to it before, it's our time to go. Maybe
Yeah.
there is no remembering here, but it feels deeply clear that some of these memories are there waiting to be accessed when we're ready. And they formed us before we had words for them, like you said. Yeah.
Oh, oh, that's a beautiful image to think about that you just shared of that, slide rule, and that you can just go back and pull out a memory from any particular time especially in those deep meditative states, or in in breath work. Definitely that is a place where sometimes that comes up for me, is those, just being able to be in that altered state and having a memory or going back to a time and being able to see it from a different angle or in a different way.
And I've done some exercises where the invitation was to go back to the
Mm,
past and talk to the self then, the little girl, the teenage girl, whatever.
yeah.
And sometimes the, the information that's shared back to me is a memory I didn't have. So that's the feeling of, for me, remembering again,
Yeah.
remembering something that was forgotten, but really bringing the memories back together. So everything, like the puzzle pieces, kind of come back together. I wrote a tiny little piece recently. I've started leaning back into writing, which I think I always wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I said something in there like the that I was born on a dark, right after midnight on a Tuesday night in Greece, and the fingerprints of a million ancestors lived inside of me, and their pains and their love and their sufferings created me unknowingly. And I thought to myself as I was writing it, because I don't even know where that came from, right? This feeling of like, where do those thoughts and those ideas come from? And as I started to write that, I thought to myself, and their lack of freedom also created me, because their feelings of, this is the box we live in, and this is the box, and you can't push past the box. That created me too. And there was something about writing that. It felt like I was rewriting the past, because in that moment, it was a bridge to the past, to that infant that came into this world. And I was like, you know what? Actually, the two of us are communicating right now through words.
Yeah.
And you know what? The box maybe is not as well defined as the people around you may make you think.
Mm,
So who says I'm not somehow, like shifting it just by being aware of it and expressing and being willing to look at it that way, which sometimes can be very quirky, but
yeah.
feels playful somehow, less serious to say, like, let's play.
Yeah. Wow, that's beautiful. So what, if you could put words to it, what is this box that you felt like that you were brought into, where you were constrained or told not to push out or have different ideas?
Thank you so much for that. I think it's a lot of, I'm sure you know Dr. Gabor Mate, where he says trauma is not what happened to you, it's how you feel about what happened to you. Or
Yeah.
if you don't have the adults around you to say you're okay, it's not you. I think my box was don't don't be too much of anything. Not too smart, not too, loud, not too creative. Make sure everyone else around you feels safe, that keep everything small. And it sounds difficult saying this, honestly, as we're speaking, because it feels so, even as I'm saying this, like I'm somehow hurting other people that might be listening. That's how deep it is, I think. But I think the box was don't push too much, don't be better than anyone else, and certainly don't take up any space. And I realized over time that the taking up space from me, in that same way that I tried to be invisible, it turned from me to eating, because it was so interesting. Like, food became comfort, and I took up more physical space in this unusual way, which I started to realize in the last few years. So the box was not to make anyone else feel threatened. Don't be too much of anything that makes anyone else feel like they're doing less than you.
Yeah.
Gender, culture, identity, status, all of that. And I think I don't know that it'll ever go away. It's always going to be there. It's too deep. But just the awareness is good. And you got me thinking. I have to tell you got me thinking.
Oh, good.
Powerful.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm glad, because I'm over here deeply thinking as well, and reflecting on my own boxes that I feel that I was put in this very similar. I know it is a very common experience for people who are raised as girls or women are kind of around the world, but particularly in pockets of the world. There are cultures, and me growing up in the Midwest in the United States, that was definitely very ingrained, was this: don't be too much, don't be too loud, be a good girl, be nice, and just, do what your parents say. This kind of, all of these layer that were put on top, and eventually get to the point of being, for me, being suffocating.
Yeah, absolutely. And if
Do
I
you
can
remember? Oh, go
add,
ahead. Yeah.
I started to realize, and again, it felt, if I can share a little bit of what happened in one of these women's retreats. And it was
Yeah.
specifically the first time that I went to a retreat that was all women. So I've been, feel very fortunate and privileged that I've been able to take that time and explore modalities and do the work, if you will. This was the first time that I went to an all women's retreat. And I remember feeling uncomfortable because I had never done that before. And it was there that I realized that box that I was in, that I somehow thought was a box set up more by culture, and the idea of female versus male.
Mm-hmm.
It was there that I realized the box was also from other women. And that box of not doing anything that would feel threatening to other women. And that created a sense of not just suffocation, which you so perfectly said. And it's interesting, I'm hypothyroid, which I think that feeling of blocking the, voice. But I realized in that retreat that I didn't fully feel like I belonged to the idea of female, because there was this feeling of I couldn't be as expressive. And I don't know if that's just purely my own insecurities that did that, but I didn't feel like I could fully be myself in this world that in my particular little corner of the world. And I realized that the feeling of the box was also from other women, which was such a big surprise. Such a big surprise. It was always this feeling of men. The threat was from men, or the feeling of stay small was from men. And it was very much. And I think I must have done that too. because I'm part of that too. I've always wondered, after that, I wondered, well, did I raise my daughter that way also inadvertently? I must have, if that was kind of the water I was swimming in. So that realization, that grace that I felt towards others and to self, realizing how much of it was co-created, was honestly like earth moving on some level. And I think something I is still very deeply unpacking. Being here with you is because I did that work that particular September. Being here with you, that feeling of feeling safe with another woman, to go deep like this is it's incredible to me. It's incredible to me. So yeah.
I completely understand what you're saying, because I have now attended 2 women's retreats and one retreat that was mixed gender, and there was just such a different energy between them. Neither good nor bad. It was just different. And all retreats have their own kind of energy and bring different things to it. But the first women's retreat that I did, I was so, and I had, Morgan was one of the retreat leaders. I've had her on the podcast and shared this story on that episode, but there was this feeling of such dissociation as I was walking into the retreat, because it was so disorienting to be in that space with 20 other women who I knew we were all there to be vulnerable and raw and didn't know exactly what was going to happen. And I was shaking. I mean, my skin just, vibrating with this fear and anxiety for the first day and a half.
Did you have a sense that it was because it was all women?
Yes. And I knew that was something that I needed to work through, is this, whether we call it the mother wound or the women wound or something like that. I knew that there was this difficulty that I had, a lot of pain that had been brought on by my experiences with girls and women through my life.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
That the mother wound, which you mentioned, I'm not an expert in any of these things, but something, if I could share a little bit, these dinners that I've been doing on and off since about 2016, where I provide like a question and then everyone kind of goes around and answers the same question. And I've noticed that in the dinners where the question involves something around this idea of an early pain or a feeling of longing, it's absolutely staggeringly, poignantly, painfully beautiful to me. Almost always it's about the mother. Almost always it's about the mother. The feeling of not belonging, or not having felt loved or seen, or losing a mother. It seems to be across all genders, across all cultures, across all like socioeconomic. It's such a deep wound for all of us. And sometimes I wonder if how far back it goes. Like, again, I think so much of this like lives in our genes. And my mother, her my mother was 9 months in the womb of her mother when her father was killed in front of my grandmother, her mother. And again, going back to these retreats inside of these like deep spaces, I literally looked through the eyes of my grandmother and felt like I saw the whole thing happening, and feeling literally the shot going through my grandmother's eyes into the fetus, my mother. Yeah. And if I remember correctly, I, as an egg, was already in my mother.
Yes.
And then that wound, it just keeps repeating and repeating. Like, where does it stop if we don't start to see it and say we're safe everything is okay. I went on a tangent here. I apologize. I just realized I don't know where I took it, but it's funny. Like tears came to my eyes, realizing how the feeling of belonging to other women, to the tribe, if you will. I think we've lost that somehow. We've lost that in this modern time. So it's not just the mother wound, maybe it's the female, the tribe, the being together in circle, knowing that, someone's right there to talk and hold and console and give advice, share a recipe, like all those things we've forgotten.
Yeah. I know that I have a deep longing in me for more community, and not just a community of women, but a community of all people, all ages. Just, there's, I think, this really deep ancient part of me that desperately wants to be back in a village and to have that experience of, the grandparents and the babies and the all the ages and all the people and everybody just working together and doing their parts. And I don't know how that happens, but I know I want to lean in or to listen to that voice inside of me. And I think your idea of doing the supper club dinners. And so I want to hear a little bit more about those,
Yeah.
because I think that's one way that we can start to reintegrate that in our lives, is doing things like that. So can you explain to me what is this? How did it originate? What is it? What does your supper club look like? Tell me all the details.
Well, it started, it again, I deeply believe like this idea of like this, where does it come from? Like where are these silvery threads we pick up when we're ready to see them? And for me, it was this very unusual moment. I was in Poland with my husband, and it was 2016, and I had joined him for a koi kind of club expedition. And I just went for the fun of it. And it was the very last night. And it was a really lovely group of, it was all men, lovely group of men. And it was this long table in Poland at this restaurant. The night had dragged on for 3 hours there, very Europe in terms of like lingering and talking. And the next day we were all flying home. So that almost everyone there was from the US. And I remember thinking, "Ah, I can't. I'm bored." And I was at the head of this long table, and there was, I think, 12 other people around the table. And out of nowhere, I raised my kind of voice and said, "Does everyone want to play a game?" I imagine that it was brewing inside of me. I don't remember that part. And everyone kind of looked around at me. I was at the head again, and my husband looked at me nervously, like, "Uh-oh."
Yeah.
Right? Because like I was just a guest. And I said, "Would you like to play a game?" And everyone politely said yes. And I said, "Okay, here's the rules of the game. I'm going to ask a question, and everyone's going to go around and answer the question. And as the question is being answered, no one speaks, no one crosstalks, no one offers advice, no one says like, 'Oh, that reminds me.' Just everyone listens, and everyone answers the same question." And everyone said like, "Okay," and they started to be playful and were like, "Are we going to do more than one?" I was like, "Yeah." Again, I had never done this before, Kelly. And I said, "Yeah, we'll start light and we'll go deep." Well, in the first, we went around, and I still remember this. I think I like put it up on Facebook or something. And the first one was the first round of questions was like something simple. I have it somewhere. The second one, I went deeper. And by the third one, this was almost 2.5 hours later. And I think we were already there like 2.5 hours. The restaurant had closed. What started off is people sitting next to each other and saying like, "Oh, how long's your flight? And how much did you pay for that koi?" And there was one of the men was, hunched over crying because of what he shared, that he said he'd never shared with anyone else in his life. And the man on the other side of him holding his shoulders. Something happened there, some magic, some alchemy that had nothing to do with me, just came through me. And the fact that I was the only woman, maybe being in this unusual place, in the world, allowed that freedom to express. But I saw something happen there. And then the next day at the airport, the people that were kind of in the same terminal as us going back home were like, where'd that come from? Thank you for doing that. I've never shared that with anyone. And what I realized over the years is men, especially, don't have a place to be heard, don't have that opportunity to speak about emotion and about those kind of feelings without being strong or feeling that maybe they'll be judged or weak or whatever. So it started there. And somewhere along the way, especially during COVID, I was doing it mostly just for women. And then in the last few months, actually, I started doing it as like specifically entrepreneur little gatherings. And it's been, I can't explain it. It's the most incredible feeling because all I do is open the container and everyone else says yes. And I've used some of the principles from the book, The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. And it's just beautiful. And who knows, one day maybe it'll be a more specific like business. And then if I could just add one more thing, one of my dear friends, Tracy, she was visiting me in New York. And we at the end of this like lovely meditation kind of gift that she gave me, this woman came in via Zoom. At the end of it, she said, I had this download. And I think, and she called it Tell Love Stories. And it's all love stories. And now, totally in tandem with that, we've started hosting Tell Love Stories dinners where everyone shares in a very construct kind of way a love story. And sometimes it's painful and sometimes it's beautiful. Oftentimes it's about the mother wound. Men, women of all backgrounds, that desire to be seen and heard and to realize we're not alone. It is the most incredible thing that I think, I don't know, it's just incredible. It's just such a gift to be able for people to say yes when I invite. It feels giddy, actually. And then I feel very scared, like everyone's going to say no. But it's like this beautiful, deep in the heart kind of, oh my God, I don't know where it came from, but I'm so grateful it did. So that's the Supper Club, and the actual company name that has become is Gather. So Gather, the idea of turning that into maybe a brick and mortar, but gather to speak, gather to love, gather to heal, gather to connect, gather to work, gather to rage, gather. I think now, especially with AI, we need to gather more intentionally. So
Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree. I think the more we open up these online spaces and have these different technologies come in, the more we need to balance that with connection and community. And I adore ChatGPT. I think it's incredible. I use it as a resource for my business, or even I use it in between my own personal therapy sessions, where it's a space where I go to and I'll have ChatGPT like analyze my dreams, and it does a pretty good job actually. Uh, so it can be used for those really incredible purposes, and it isn't a replacement for human connection, for human relationship.
and it's funny, I had this thought a few weeks ago, and then somebody shared it somewhere like a day or two ago.
Yeah.
But I thought to myself, I don't know if artificial is the right word. What if it's aware intelligence?
Mm.
What if it's in our limited, not in a negative way, but in our limited brain capacities
Yeah.
from an evolutionary and a conscious level? What if it's not artificial? Maybe it's a different awareness. What if this is here to actually bring a new, I don't know, it's a thought that hasn't fully evolved in me, but maybe because the minute we give it a box, artificial, we've lost curiosity. Good and bad. We've lost curiosity. So maybe there's more to this than, and not just fear, not just creativity, but maybe there's something more here that we haven't fully realized. So I'm just interested in seeing where that might go.
Yeah, I am as well. I'm definitely definitely curious. And I don't know, for you, is there any is there any fear that comes up for you? I'm asking because I know I have this sometimes, but thinking about the future and how quickly things can change, either when I think about AI or just when I think about how technology doubles, just gets so much, continues to get so much more advanced and so much more intelligent and intuitive, that as grateful as I am for it, that there's also this fear or uncertainty that comes up in me.
Oh, in a big way, especially when I see my children, I adore them. When I see, especially not all of them, or I'm not sure, but that, especially with social media and technology and how that has become such a extension of who they are. Not that it isn't for me, but maybe more so, for the younger generations. That feeling of, I mean, they already are hybrid, phone, human.
Yeah.
Where do we go from? Where have we lost our capacity to be bored, and from boredom to be creative, to find it from ourselves, from themselves, what to do next versus constantly needing this outside thing to to fill the void, to feel the connection. I a friend shared the other day that her sister-in-law's 13-year-old, who has been lonely a big part of his like preteen years, has started using ChatGPT as his friend and has conversations during the day and openly talks about it as his buddy. And that for me feels, yeah, that's technology playing a role that it should not be, well, maybe it could a little bit, but maybe not on that level. Where have we, what do we do? Can we turn the gears backwards at this point? No. But how can we at least reroute the machine? Um,
Yeah. I mean, that's the movie. That's like one of the, the movie Her, like pretty much the plot of that movie where, the AI girlfriend and becomes this man's one and only. So if people haven't seen it, definitely go check that movie out, because that is really kind of where we're coming to now.
the second time I've heard that movie in 2 days. I've yet to watch it. It's
Oh,
interesting.
you should. You definitely should.
It's
I
a
think you'll
cautionary tale, isn't it?
I'd say it's both a cautionary tale, and the thing I think about for your friends, friend of a friend's son, is that the the part of that is beautiful. There is a part of it that's scary because it's not having a connection with a human. But the part of it that I think is beautiful is, oh well, good. Like that teen boy feels a little bit less alone. And that's really all we ever want, right? Is to feel less alone and that somebody or something understands us. And maybe, for some kids, I know it was their pet growing up, that their dog or their cat or their bird were their little thing that they could go and talk to and feel seen and understood. And now it's a phone or an AI device. And there's definitely a part of me that's like, oh, thank goodness that kid has something.
It's reminds me of like before when I said the feeling of curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
The minute we allow that feeling of possibility of like, who says it has to be only this way?
Yeah.
And if we take the fear out of it, you know, there's another possibility there. The where my mind went with this,
Yeah.
also, I totally tangent if I,
Yes, let's do it. I love a good tangent, Maria.
but it's this. It may sound a bit judgmental, and I put that judgment on myself too. But I've been feeling a lot about the work that a lot of people are doing nowadays in terms of wellness and, retreats and massage and breath work and ice baths and, sound baths and on and on and on. It's amazing. And I think I may have shared this with you before, but the idea of wellness has a we in it. The feeling of wellness. I can be well, but if my family is not well, if my community is not well, if my team is not well, if my country is not well, I'm, living in an illusion. And the feeling that I've had more and more is after, again, this like amazing, these retreats and all these things I'm able to experience are so nourishing. And then when I leave, I have to get into the real world and do the work and be willing to get off the yoga mat and be willing to get off of the transformational space and realize that I'm a human among other humans and I have to do the work there. The often messy, the painful, the rejection, the people having no idea about these other possibilities and being mean and unkind and horrible to each other often. And I think that feeling of being willing to go off of our own wellness and go into the we of it and go to that 13-year-old's parents maybe and say, how are you doing? Because there's a part of me that wonders if it starts there. How are they not connecting with their child also? And kind of like following the breadcrumbs backwards to be willing to deal with the pain and to be willing to ask for help and to feel like humans around us can, say, be willing to hear, like, how many dinner parties have you and I been to where everyone's great? Everyone's marriage is great. Everyone's job is great. Everyone's finances are great. Everyone's internal state of being is great. No, going back to the dinners, that's what comes up in the dinners. I'm not so great. Mm-hmm. And people can hear it and share that they're not so great in all ways either. Yeah. That getting out there and being not pushy about it, of course, but to be willing to say, like, what's going on? How are you? Like, how are you? That's, I think, the work for me is the work left to be done. I don't know that it'll ever end. And for me, the cautionary tale with AI might be that we could stay away from being in the messy middle of being human, because all our problems can be solved right here. And then what? Yeah. I don't know. Being curious again. I'm not saying, certainly not saying I know, but I think that those are the corners, the little in betweens that I've started to pick up on, and I'm like scared to go down those rabbit holes, but I think it's definitely what I've been doing. Even being here is going down the rabbit hole, so I'm so like excited to be here.
Yes, and that wasn't a tangent at all. That was perfect. That was exactly leaning into that curiosity of like, well, what if we think about this in a different way? And I love that that is part of the work that you're doing in the world. And I love that you're doing these dinners. I hope that you continue to do more of them and that someday I am able to be at one, because that's the kind of dinner party that I would love to go to, instead of the one where it's like, let's talk about the surface conversations. Let's, ask about, oh, so, kids, work, like you can talk about those things, or you can talk about you can talk to someone about what they're feeling, what their challenges are in life. And that's why I'm doing this, having these conversations here, because that's something that I knew I was longing for. So I'm glad you were able to join me for it.
I am too. And if I could also mirror back, this has been such a huge learning experience for me, such a growth moment, because I realized that even speaking to you, the feeling of safety you created, that I can be myself, and realizing that in this space, there's always that fear. Did I say too much? Did I say something that sounded judgmental? Did I say something that was like, who am I? I'm not a psychologist or a therapist. Kelly knows so much more than me. But to be here and to say, like, I don't know, and I'm willing to say I don't know, but to be here human and safe and not to feel judged, I think is the secret.
Yeah.
Just to be with each other and not to just to be with each other. To stay curious. So thank you so much. It's just amazing. I really,
Yeah.
you made a big impact on my life. Thank you.
Oh, Maria, thank you so much.
You
Well,
really did.
thank you for joining me today. Do you have any parting words or things that you would, is there anything more that you would like to share before we say goodbye for today?
I think if I would say anything, it's just keep doing the work of being who we are. No one else can do that for us. Not to be afraid to be who we are, because it's all we got. And then to just connect with other incredible people and to say yes, like this, to say yes, which I said no so many times. And I said yes. So thank you. Thank you. I wish you so much luck with this. This is such a beautiful everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for being part of the Happy Rebel podcast community. Stay connected with us on Instagram at Happy Rebel. If you've enjoyed our episodes, please consider rating, liking, and reviewing the podcast. It truly does help us grow. Until next time, this is Kelly Street. Remember, embrace the dark and the light.